It's 7:02 p.m., November the 15th, to call the regular meeting of the Helotes Economic Development Commission to order. I take it there are no citizens to be heard?
No, sir.
Okay, we have the consent agenda, which is approval of the minutes of the last meeting and approval of the FY 2018 revenue expenditure report dated November 13th. Does anyone have any questions on those items? We have a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second. Motion by Wayne, seconded by Jim. No discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Next action item is discussion and action on a lease agreement between Doug Deptouch and City EDC for lease of commercial property for EDC office space. Could I have a motion to discuss, please?
I move we discuss the lease agreement.
Second.
Moved by Diane, seconded by, what's your name? Carl. I don't know if you've had a chance to review the agreement. I went over it this afternoon. It's a pretty standard agreement. And the best thing about it is we've got a 5-year lease that renews automatically the first of each year with a 90-day out clause in it at a rate of $700 a month for 1,000 square feet at a set rate for 5 years, which is probably
Below market value?
close to 50% of what the normal
Yes.
going lease rate would be for that. You don't want to take a minute to review it, or?
Did we figure out the status of the air conditioning system since we were responsible for it? You were looking to see if they had been replaced recently or something, I think?
If I could, may I go over some items?
Yep.
Okay. I will address that.
Okay.
But I did want to go over a few quick things. So first off, all parties have essentially reviewed this. The important one is ourselves and the attorney have reviewed it. There have been considerable changes to the standard lease agreement that Mr. Deptouch typically uses. We have sent it to him, and he has been having some difficulty with track changes. And so we, as I said in the email to y'all, we have a handshake deal on this. But I would imagine that there may be some things that he would like to tweak, okay? And so if you are okay with this agreement in premise, I would ask that you would allow staff to negotiate and execute this contract with Mr. Deptouch, because there may be minor changes that he would like to see with regard to indemnity and things like that. But the substance of the agreement should remain the same. The other thing that I wanted to go over was the HVAC. If you go to Section 7 on page 3, it does say under Section 7.2 that the tenant's responsibilities include the repair and replacement of all lighting, heating, air conditioning, plumbing, and other electrical, mechanical, yada yada. Basically, it includes everything, including the HVAC system. Now, what Mr. Deptouch and I have agreed to, if there's something substantive that happens in that building and it's integral to the building itself, and that's enumerated here in another section, like, for example, within the foundation or something in the walls or the roof caves in, obviously that falls on the landlord himself. If there is an HVAC issue, you have one HVA or multiple HVAC units per tenant space, and that would fall on the EDC. He would not accept responsibility for that. That's standard in all of his agreements. He doesn't replace them. Now, if in the original 30, 60, 90-day agreement, now remember, I don't know if you know this, but Deptouch is also the chairman of the Board of Adjustment. So he's been very flexible with how we've tried to configure this lease agreement. So I have it at his word that if something happens to the AC unit within the first 30 to 60 days, that would fall on him. If it was after that, then through normal maintenance, then of course we would have to replace that unit, which you would be talking anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000, depending on the size of the unit. The other thing that I wanted to mention is I have had staff look at some changes or revisions to the inside of the building. And so if you would pass this out, please. We looked at signage costs, the flooring throughout the building, and painting in the building as well. Unfortunately, I've only received one quote. We have solicited for 3 quotes for each one of those types of projects. I've only received 1 quote per type of project, if you will. For signage, it would be a 3x8 metal sign with an acrylic front, similar to how the other signs are on the building. We're looking at approximately $2,500 for that sign. Concrete flooring, my preference would be to remove the carpet, just from a maintenance perspective, and clean the concrete and seal it. Creative Concrete, who is a local company, came back with a quote of $10,400. And painting, Alamo Handyman LLC came back with a quote for 2 coats of satin finish on the walls and 1 coat of semi-gloss on the woodwork for $2,644. So a total of that at this point would be about $15,500 to renovate that, those 2 spaces, or that 1,000 or 1,100 square feet. The other thing that the corporation could do tonight, and it would be something that I would prefer, then again, I don't know if y'all would prefer that. If you look at the rent structure and how much we budgeted through the end of this fiscal year, essentially we would be utilizing $7,700 of that $12,000 that we budgeted for rental space, which would leave about $4,300 left. And if you subtract the $4,300 from what I consider to probably be a maximum amount, because I believe the concrete floor quote is a little high, you would be looking at about $11,200 in additional expenditures, which, in looking at the budget, we could utilize on a subsequent item. What we would be talking about under the critical habitat, we budgeted $105,000 for not only conceptual design of land use throughout the city, but also at the last budget meeting, we talked about possibly doing something with the critical habitat on that site. So I would recommend doing an internal budget adjustment of the $11,200 or $11,300 to cover those additional costs. And then everything should be able to be included within this year's budget without any substantive change out of any one of those line items. So with that, are there any questions?
I had one question on the HVAC.
Yes, sir.
I'm assuming that with the way the lease ended up, there's no overlap of AC between the other tenant and this tenancy? None of the services are going to overlap between the 2 spaces?
No, there's an unair-conditioned space in between the 2 tenant spaces that they are taking over, but it's unair-conditioned.
Okay.
I have a question about the sign and reading section 10, sign and graphics. The layout and the colors of our sign will be approved by the landlord, because it says he has the right to disapprove color, style, size.
Yes,
of
we
any
talked
sign.
about that, and he knows that he's agreeable to essentially anything the EDC wants to place on the building. And if you remember, the sign code does not apply to the EDC because it's a governmental entity, so we have some leeway there with how we handle that. That building does have a I'm sorry, there is a mosquito or something around it. But we do have, there is a master sign plan for that property, so the largest we could go and still comply with that master sign plan would be 3x8, which is why that's what I got in the quote. I'm sorry, but it's driving me nuts.
It's a fly. It's a big one.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I have a question about, you have here concrete cleaned. Is that going to be where they take it down to, down a layer, actually?
That does include etching the surface, yes, sir.
No, that'll be slick when it's sealed.
Probably falling down.
No, it really looks good. My daughter is an interior designer, and she does some of that.
Now, this does not include staining. I just wanted to see what the
Right.
cost would
No,
be
seal.
for a clear sealer on it. So that, again, was what we looked at. Again, I still think for 1,000 square feet, the 10,400 may be a little bit higher, but that's why we approached two other companies. And all of these companies have excellent ratings on Angie's List, which we've started to use ourselves. Signs Above the Rest used to be Superior Signs, and of course Keller Signs is a large company. They're the ones that did our LED sign out front. And Cold Fire Signs is a relatively large company that's done things for USAA and Rackspace and things of that sort. Concrete flooring I simply found through Angie's List. But again, I was looking for, okay, what would be an approximate cost to do these improvements? I know that Glenn has spoken with President Wooten about doing some modifications to the walls. I think that if we utilized internal staff with this 15,005 as a maximum, that, and hopefully reductions in the concrete floors, that we could probably do some of those things with this dollar amount. Again, if that's something that you wanted to look at.
Is that building walls, or is that what you mean, Glenn?
It's essentially taking down some walls, they're dummy walls anyway, and putting some new walls up.
We should do that before the floors get done.
If we wanted to do that, we could.
So I have a couple questions, Rick. This sounds like a conflict of interest to begin with. Is it not?
Doug Deptouch has filed his conflict of interest questionnaire with the city secretary, and that's all that's necessary.
Okay. So we're good?
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't seen this, so are there any pictures that would suggest that the concrete floors are really bad? Do you have those?
Yes. So the other thing that I have up here is we have received certificates of insurance from TML. There was no additional cost for that insurance, but the insurance would include not only the building itself, but also the contents up to $100,000. And there would be no additional contribution at this point. There was also some indemnification in adding Mr. Deptouch as an additional insured, actually his company as an additional insured. And so we have gone through and they have issued those certificates. We wouldn't have had them issue them had there been no cost, but we just went ahead and did it to get that completed. This does include all general liability, and again, it would include the contents of the structure of the EDC up to 100,000. Some of these pictures are good, some are not so great. So this is the entryway into the building from the front door. Basically, to the left is Pope's Cleaners. Pope's Cleaners is in this tenant space over here, and then Janus Custom Homes is over in this area over here. So you walk in, and there is a reception area. This is the main hallway. That hallway goes into, there's a restroom right here, a full restroom, a working area in between the restroom and that back office space, and of course there's the back office space. It's hard to see in these pictures, but the carpet it's carpet that's down there right now. It's very stained, it's worn considerably, and so if we don't do the concrete floors, I would at least recommend doing, of course, carpet to replace that. I just think that from a maintenance perspective over 5 years, that concrete, it's going to last forever, and we're not going to have to worry about anything. This is the work area in between the bathroom here and that back office space. That could be used for copy machine, fax. We could do in that area some sort of breakfast area or food area. This is looking from, and again, I'm sorry about the picture quality, but this is looking from the office in the rear up to the front door area. This, if you notice, there is a doorway here, right here. It basically goes into the other tenant space.
Not tenant space, it's the same office.
Well, there originally was two,
1,000 square foot.
originally there were two tenant spaces there, so. They're both 500 square feet essentially. So this goes into an office space up here. This is an office that we have. Those are windows that would look out on 1560 or Bandera Road. This is looking from that office down the other hallway. Again, you have a workroom just like you have on the other side here. This is another office space, and then there's a fourth office space in the rear. This is the office space in the back. If I recall, it's about 20 by 10, I believe. So it's a relatively large space. This is in that same room, just looking the opposite way.
Can it be subleased?
It cannot be, Mr. Deptouch does not allow his tenants to sublet.
Okay, so we can't share it with anybody.
Because it's an EDC or a city office, I do believe that he would work with us if we wanted to share it with somebody, but he would, the lease agreement allows him the authority to authorize subletting, okay? But he has not done it in the past simply because he would never know who is in there. But because he has this relationship with the city, and because it's the city, I think that he would be amenable to it. He just would want to know who it is. So I'm not going to say definitively yes or no. I can just tell you historically, he doesn't allow it, but he's been very helpful up to this point. So if it was like the chamber or if it was whoever, a reputable organization, I think he would probably have no problem with it.
Okay.
I had two-part question. One, do we anticipate the public coming to this particular office? And two, if we do, is there any designated parking in that very tight area at all?
We do anticipate the public coming into this facility, and there is, the landlord has the ability to designate 2 spots, up to 2 spots for this office space. We plan on asking him to do so, but we can have, again, because it's so close to City Hall.
Right.
Individuals could park at City Hall and then walk to the EDC offices. Frankly, they do that at that shopping center anyway.
We could make the person occupying the office to certainly walk over there, but the public might not want to.
Sure.
Yeah, he does assign parking spaces.
Good.
Bert had a question, I think.
Is it okay? Okay, so this is a
If, we are on TV, so if you would, sir, go up to the mic, please.
I'm Bert Byes, EDC Liaison, City Council. This is a 5-year lease at $700 a month. I mean, that sounds really great. I mean, there's no, for 5 years, it's never going to go up?
That's how we have anticipated it at this point, yes.
Yes, it's
That
5
is-
years and there's a 90-day out clause.
And it's 1,100 square feet?
It's two 10 by 5,
It's
50,
It's 21 by 49.
21 by 49. So it's approximately 500, are you talking about collectively? Yeah, it's about 1,000 square feet. It's a little over 1,000 square feet.
So it's probably a little bit more than we would need. So when you guys were talking about Mr. Dubtich, wanting to, he's in control of somebody else, I think the chamber was thinking about maybe, using the same building, and they're kind of, we're kind of married together as far as the chamber and the EDC a little bit. So I think maybe talk to him about that and make sure he'd be amenable to that. Okay. Now, you guys have talked about a budget for this. Now, have you talked about, moving your computers and, buying computers, printers, and all that for your new office?
Yeah, we included within this fiscal year's budget some additional monies for operational expenses, more than we have done in the past.
Okay, and is it enough to, get everything started up?
Should be, but again, until we know for sure, we may have to come back during the year and ask for a budget amendment. But at this time, I feel very comfortable with the dollars that are included in the budget.
Okay, sounds good. I would just talk to Mr. Deptouch and make sure that he'd be amenable to maybe letting the chamber use the same office space, because 1,100 square feet is probably a lot more than the EDC needs, in my estimation. So maybe go.
We've been discussing that. We're gonna have further discussions with the chamber and Doug on it.
Okay. All right. $700 for 5 years with no increase. That's a really good deal in my mind. So, okay, that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Glenn, do you have any concerns, since you'll be the one who's actually occupying the building? with anything?
The only potential issue is that Janus Custom Homes is taking over the storage space that's connected with this one, and they use the same or at least the electrical panel is in the storage space. So we've got to just maintain a door into that storage area. It's the only,
But it could be assumably there's a deadbolt on it currently,
right.
like a hotel or whatever would be between rooms.
Two-way deadbolt.
Any more questions?
Better than working out of your house.
I would suggest a motion to allow staff to finalize the lease details with Mr. Duptouch and proceed with getting final pricing on the proposed improvements, and if they stay within the guidelines that Rick's outlined, to have the authority to go ahead and do it.
I would make the motion if as provided that the final lease agreement is substantially in agreement with what we've seen tonight, that we go forward with and allowing staff to finalize the agreement.
Second that.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Diane. Any further discussion? Wayne?
Yep. Go ahead.
No, I didn't have any.
You know, to Rick's point, I think the concrete floor estimate is very high. Okay, I'm not a contractor, but as you guys know my background, what I look at is costing, and I look for waste. And I think that's a huge waste of money we don't need to spend. I think if we get good, solid, comfortable carpeting that'll last, that should be sufficient. The painting, one of the questions I had about the painting, is that something, because it's a pretty small area, is that something Helotes Maintenance, our own city maintenance people could do? Or is that just out of bounds?
I can tell you that my immediate supervisor would want to be reimbursed for the cost of Public Works personnel to do that. But I have no idea how much that would be.
Very good. All right, we can just do a painting party and see who shows up.
We have beer.
Painted my
Me and Bert
office
will be
here at City Hall,
I
so.
mean, it's not an outrageous amount of money, but if we could keep it in-house, I'd rather do that, quite frankly. And pay them overtime, as long as it stays within a budget that's less than the 2,600.
Well, I don't know if we have any maintenance people that have any painting experience.
Yeah, I'm just saying I can do it. I painted my office here at City Hall. I painted my whole house. It's not that hard.
And to the point on the flooring too, just another suggestion, I don't know if it's worth looking into, but I know laminate wood flooring can be put down for, you purchase for $2 a square foot and laid down for $2 or less per square foot. So you're looking at $4,000, give or take there, for laminate wood flooring, which I've done in my office, turned out okay.
But that'd be very professional
And
looking.
durable,
Yeah,
more so than the carpet would be.
yeah, good. I'm okay with that. So those are my comments. Because I'm not going to vote for a blanket just to go ahead and do this at these estimates. You're not going to get
Well,
my
I said
vote.
that,
I don't think on the floor was the talk about the improvements. We were talking about the lease agreement.
Well, the
and-
lease agreement plus the improvements is what I was hearing.
No, I didn't make that motion.
Okay.
okay, well, we've got a motion on the floor, let staff finalize the lease agreement and execute the lease agreement. Let's vote on that. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And as far as the improvements, we can see what other numbers we get on that and see what other alternatives we have. We've got a little time a little bit of time to work on that, to get it in, and we can do, I guess, some email correspondence on that if we want to go ahead and get started, which we probably will before the next meeting. That's acceptable to everybody. So in essence, we're giving staff the
Carte
approval
blanche.
to go ahead with the improvements, once they've notified us of cost and we're in agreement on it. Is that legal to do that way?
No.
No?
You could approve a budget not to exceed tonight, with getting additional approval at a subsequent meeting. So if there was an amount you were comfortable with on renovations.
Do we know what flooring costs roughly?
Roughly $2 a square foot for the flooring, $2 a square foot to lay it down. And that's, so I would say $4,500
And then with
would be my estimate.
And we could probably put that down ourselves.
And that's decent quality too.
Yeah. Good.
That's not the low grade.
No, nobody's in favor of spending $10,000 to do the concrete. I think we can probably get that done a lot cheaper than that too. We just gotta get some more bids in. We've got a couple of handymen here in town we can talk to about that too. He might do that kind of work.
Trying to
too,
think where the
but,
place I went to and got that at.
Well, didn't we say that there were maybe some walls to be moved?
Yeah,
We'd wanted to have that done before we put flooring in,
absolutely.
or painting.
Nothing in there's load bearing. I mean, it's all,
Well,
Yeah, there's no load bearing in it.
Are you going to be allowed to move those walls?
yes.
Okay.
What about 10, not to exceed 10,000?
That's what I was gonna say, because if you added up the signage and the painting currently, and then $4,500 for flooring, assumably whatever it ends up being, you're looking at $9,700 right there.
but not to exceed 10.
But that does not include your walls.
And a good grade of carpet's gonna cost you $4 or $5 a square foot time to get it put in.
I like the wood concept. better.
Carpet's the same cost. That's why I put laminate in, because carpet was even more.
Okay, how about make a motion to, tonight approve, maximum of $10,000 for interior improvements, at staff discretion to get the best prices in and get the job done,
Did you say not to exceed?
not to exceed 10,000. May we have a motion, please?
I'll motion
Second.
that we give staff the authority to execute the office finish out not to exceed $10,000.
Right.
Second.
Motion made by Joel, seconded by Carl. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, gee, I'm not voting. Approved, passes unanimously. The next item, discussing appropriation of $105,000 for operating budget to possibly include removal of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Critical Habitat designation on Bandera Road. I would like to adjourn to executive session to discuss that. And I'll explain why when we get in executive session. There's
What
some-
is the legal justification for closed session on this?
Well, it could, by doing this, could end up in legal action, is why I want to, the repercussions of it could cause legal action. That's why I want to go to executive session to discuss it.
If
One thing
you,
you can do is economic development. It's an incentive.
I do not feel comfortable doing that.
I don't feel comfortable discussing it in open session.
Well, then I would suggest postponing the item until a subsequent meeting when legal representation can actually be in the meeting with us. We can't go in for legal reasons without an attorney present.
We can go in on financial matters, and this is possibly budgeting $100,000 to do it, which is a financial matter.
I would strongly suggest that y'all not and postpone this item. You can't go into closed session for financial matters.
Is there a time dependency, Rick, on this proposal?
Nope.
Okay.
No, it's just something we're talking about doing for the future, possibly. Okay, and I'll have some discussions with staff on it. I think there's some legal items we need to address before we bring it up to be discussed.
Yeah, I mean, the presentation that I had tonight included some discussions on those legal components with regard to what the state law says you can and cannot do. with regard to planning, for planning purposes. So, but if you do not feel comfortable, that's fine. I just would not, I would highly suggest that you'll not go into closed session for a legal reason unless an attorney's present. And there is no impetus behind this. So, I mean, if you wanted to wait until December, we can do that. We would just have to have an attorney present.
Okay, let's discuss it, and there's one thing I'd like to see done before we start discussing it. We'll discuss that, see if we can get that underway, just through the state. I'll talk to you about it later in the week, and we'll just pull item 7.
Or 6.
And go to item 8, discussion and action on a grant program, and including associated guidelines, et cetera. Could we have a motion to discuss, please?
Mr. Wooten, that was pulling item 6.
6,
So we'd be on item 7 now.
okay. We're gonna do the strategic plan workshop tonight.
No. What I wanted to suggest, Chair, was we have a strategic work plan, obviously, that we look at every year. And then we send that strategic work plan to the city council as part of our annual plan for approval, for their review and for approval. And essentially what it does is it lays out the projects that the EDC plans to work on for the subsequent year. It has been some time since the board has done a full-blown strategic planning session. And I have reached out, and it was included in your packet at the end of that. I've reached out to the San Antonio Economic Development Foundation, and also Linda Rodriguez over at CPS Energy. San Antonio Economic Development Foundation, if you don't know, but basically they're the regional entity that tries to find economic development projects and place them throughout Bexar County. In the past, they have been highly focused on the city of San Antonio, even though they are a regional entity, and they just recently have changed leadership and now are looking at Bexar County as a whole. I don't know why this is not working, but anyway, it's included in your packet. So I include within your packet a little information about the San Antonio Economic Development Foundation, but specifically Tom Long, in speaking with him, he's the Executive Vice President of Business Development for the San Antonio EDF. He worked with the EDC in the past, in addition to Linda Rodriguez, who is still at CPS in their Economic Development Department. They did the initial EDC strategic plan back in the early 2006, 2007. I would suggest to the chair and to the corporation that we look at utilizing them. They have offered their services for free of charge. I think it's important that we bring somebody in from an outside perspective that has worked in this for some time to give us input and to kind of guide us through how this board wants to move forward, not only over the next year, but over the next several years. And I think that having an outsider come in and essentially prod and poke us for answers as to where we want to see this board go, I think would be beneficial. So it's out there. We certainly don't have to utilize them, but it would be a free service, utilizing both Tom Long and Linda Rodriguez. I would recommend that we do it on a weekend, perhaps in January after the holidays. And of course, we could do it here at City Hall, and we would have refreshments provided, because it would be, if not at least half a day that we would be looking at this through their support. That's what I had to.
Oh, okay, well, it would be good to have some new ideas and new input from somebody that works with the entire area. I think we could schedule a work session in January. It'd be very beneficial.
Okay. And that's all I had on this item tonight, unless, of course, the corporation wanted to discuss it in more detail tonight. You certainly can. But I just wanted to get your input as to whether y'all wanted somebody from the outside coming in to facilitate a work session. It sounds like y'all do. So I'll do that, and we'll poll the board for January to see what dates work for y'all.
We can all put our ideas together on what we're thinking and have it in the workshop with some outside input on it too, to get a fresh point of view on it.
It'll probably open our minds a lot broader.
That sounds good.
Yeah, and if we could have, I see that this is, I assume the old work plan, but a little direction, meaning on what thoughts or ideas that you want from us, what type of input you want us to provide, so that we can have those thoughts.
Well, that's actually the key behind having Tom and Linda, is that they have facilitated many of these in the past, and so they will be able to pull that out of your brains, if you will, at this meeting. Hopefully, they can do that at this session. But if they provide something to us, like a one-pager, and says, we would like the board to think about these things before they come in, we will pass those on to y'all.
Perfect. Yeah, that would be great, if they have something, some material like that.
Okay, item 8.
Yes, would it be okay if you sent this out to the city council also and just have them attend to hear it?
Certainly.
I would appreciate that.
Okay.
Send it to the city council. I think it's an awesome thing, and the thing I like about it the most is it's free.
Good point.
Yeah.
Oh,
High caliber people, cheap, it's a good deal.
we have a motion for discussion on proposed grant program for this year and get staff's input on what they're looking at on that. Item 8.
A motion, we open this up for discussion. Item 8.
Second?
Second.
Moved by Joel, seconded by Jim. Rick and Glenn, what direction are you wanting to go with? Are we gonna do something similar to the tenant improvement
Yeah, I wanted,
program we had in the past?
we allocated $50,000 in the budget for some type of business grant, small business grant. One of the ones we did in the past was a retailer facade and tenant improvement grant that could be used for new businesses or expanding existing businesses. And so I did include that framework in here. One of the other things, I think me and Rick have kind of tossed around before, and we've kind of incorporated in 380 agreements in the past, is a reimbursement of fees to the city from small businesses. So development fees. And I wanted to pull an example, it's kind of coincidence on Slim Chickens, that they just requested a reimbursement too. But anyway, how much does a typical business pay in city permit fees? They paid $13,000 on their project, and that was without tree mitigation. If you add that, then that was almost 5,000, I believe, so that would have been, 17, 18. So something that the city of Buda did was had a small business fee reimbursement. So where the city wasn't out any money, but the EDC paid 50% of those fees for a small business coming in. It just helps reduce the upfront cost. You can tie it to specific industries, types of business, and there's various ways of structuring it.
I mean, we would have to have some pretty serious guidelines, I would think, because otherwise it would just be at the discretion of the board, which I don't like.
They usually come down to that in the past,
Yeah.
and that's always, I think, been a challenge of the board on,
Saying no.
yeah.
Yeah, we need to look at guidelines on it. I don't know how specific you can get on that, but I would like to have it directed toward retail businesses, not, I don't think we want to go in and reimburse somebody to put in a 5,000 square foot office space out of EDC monies. That's not going to generate any economic development to the city, other than the property taxes.
Not direct revenue, secondary, yes. I mean, obviously, all those people that work in an office will go and shop and eat and so forth, but
Well, we'd look to you two guys for the guidelines on this, what you'd like to have in it. You're the experts on it.
So the one we did previously was a maximum grant award of up to $10,000, and it was a matching grant. So in order for them to get 10,000, they had to spend 20,000. And it was also just for select improvements. So things that were more affixed to the property, not something that they could pick up and run away with in 6 months to a year.
For example,
Well, I mean, it's in here, there's painting facades, signage might be the one, questionable. I know a lot of businesses need help. Those can be quite expensive. Mechanical equipment, electrical, plumbing. It's on page 3 of 6, on what was allowed prior. So I just wanted to kind of present two different options of either doing a reduction of fees for businesses or actually doing a tenant improvement grant.
The one thing I want to warn the board about on this, the last time we had facade improvements, I think we awarded it to like 6 different businesses and 4 of them are out of business. So it is not, there's no guarantee that you're going to get any long-term return on it, but that's just part of dealing with small
And
businesses.
the building's still occupied though, aren't,
Right.
isn't it?
Yeah,
That's-
but we paid for signs, we paid for kitchen improvements and a restaurant that may not necessarily, the building may not stay in the same use, so the money you're spending on it, even though it's on the property, may be something that's demoed and replaced when another tenant goes into the building. But that's just part of something you face dealing with small businesses.
All right. There's
Well,
no
why
guarantees.
couldn't we limit those items, signage and, I mean, I would think the kitchen equipment is all, commercial kitchen equipment can be sold and moved and, but the building itself can't.
But it depends on what it is. I think one of those was a reefer unit or something that you couldn't pick up and move that was put in. But that might not be useful. It ended up working out all right, but it might not be useful to the next
The
tenant.
next tenant, yeah.
You might need to be a little more specific in the scope of what we pay for.
Have you explored the idea of prorating those reimbursements over time versus upfront? Their failure rate's gonna be in the first year versus having it spread out over 2 or 3 years and where there's an obligation to make that payment, but that they don't see it if they don't stay in business.
I like that.
Is that something that could potentially be done?
It could. I mean, obviously, for most of the small businesses, it's the upfront money that
Yeah, right.
they're really looking for.
But if I have an idea and 3 months' worth of rent in my pocket,
Yeah, no,
that's not something we necessarily want to have.
yeah. The only one I think we lucked out on, you mentioned a restaurant, we did Pizzeria Venti before, and it turned into Bad Dogs, so they kept the equipment. Would you rather do permit fee kind of reductions, or?
Well, my question on that, I mean, that's gonna go to, is that really necessary to attract development here, developers? Because I'm thinking of I'm thinking of
Yeah.
the projects we have on the books right now are large groups that are not necessarily, what you keep saying, small businesses, but
No,
I don't consider, the wash tub and the development happening here that's really a small business.
business.
Yeah.
Which you can classify that as well. I mean, you can put in that it cannot go towards a franchisee. You can limit number of employees. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to slice it. And we have a lot of independent stores, like Slim Chickens, yeah, it's a franchise, but that one is independently owned, and that's their only location.
Aren't most of the franchises more or less independently owned, or
Not,
the same person would own 2 or 3?
not necessarily like Wash Tub, they're all owned by Wash Tub. There's a few companies that we've met with. Chick-fil-A is all owned by Chick-fil-A.
Right, but like Dairy Queen has a specific owner.
They do.
Well, you're facing the same thing with paying fees up front.
Yeah.
No, there are no guarantees,
Oh, yeah, that's just it, dealing with small
There are no
business. There are no
guarantees.
guarantees.
no matter which way you go.
Are there other ways that we could recognize them without giving them a check? Retailer of the year,
That's,
retailer of the month, I don't know.
You know,
Versus writing them a check all the time.
I don't think the recognition is what they're looking for.
Well, if we give them recognition and had it in the paper or
Yeah.
flyers or.
I mean, we already, for new businesses, we already take care of that. You know, we've got social media, we do ribbon cuttings, press releases. And then continually, if a business wants help doing promotion, I mean, we put that on our channels too.
That
I
sounds
mean,
like,
we're always here trying to help local businesses.
sounds like that's working.
Can't hurt.
well, part of that though, Wayne, is we're gathering this money to use the money to incentivize business and expand our economic base. And we're gonna have some failures and some successes on it, but we're gonna have to spend money to do it.
Yeah. The 380 agreements, are those, can the fees be part of, are they allowed to be part of that? Typically on the 380 though, it's for a larger development. So if you're looking at, I guess the Walmart kind of was one, was a
We
380
we did
agreement.
not have a 380 with Walmart.
It was with Tom Rhodey, the developer. But that's developing, 30 acres of land,
Yeah, those are more used
not just
for
a lease.
centers and shopping centers and that sort of thing.
I mean, these little grants might be the difference before a small business that needs to make major improvements of their existing place in Helotes. It might keep them here as opposed to moving into San Antonio too. We've got to look at that as well, I think.
And we've lost a few businesses in the last couple of months to nearby strip centers,
So would,
partly because of cost. Our lease rates, I mean, they're higher than most areas around here.
so would they file some kind of application and we would kind of review it in detail?
Right.
And they'd
We
say,
create a
this
I think
money's
that's-
for these kinds of things?
There's a copy of the
It's in there.
application
Yeah.
on that.
Okay.
In there, yeah, we do an application from each one when they come before the board, and in the past, it's been done on a first come, first served basis until the money was expended for the year.
Yes, sir.
It usually doesn't take very long to get the applications to.
How are the businesses notified of this? Is it just they see need and call the city asking for help? They call all the time. Oh, really? Okay. I've already had that. Or is it you knowing, because of your relationships with them, who could utilize this, and that's part of your job, I guess? Yeah, I mean, both. Whether or not it's a business calling outright, asking if there are any incentives available. We have a lot of the brokers that tell tenants, oh, the city of Helotes has incentives, you gotta give them a call. Sorry, right now I don't, we'll work on a program. Word gets out.
Does it make any sense to combine this with our work session we're talking about in January, to try to put that as one of the items to discuss?
Yeah, I mean, I think will be one of the primary focuses of the work session.
Yeah.
How does the EDC want to spend its money?
Right.
So it may be a little premature for y'all to pinpoint exactly how you want to do that at this point, given the fact that, I'm hearing a variety of concerns on how essentially the EDC spends its money, other than debt service and operations and all of those sorts of things.
That sounds good. Let's, just, Mark?
I'm sorry, Jim, you brought up a good point. I think at the workshop it would be an excellent thing to bring up because there's a few of us that have been here and have done what you guys are discussing, and we can bring it up and how it actually helped the businesses or whether it helped them or not. If the money we spent was, fruitful and helped the business, I think that's an excellent thing to do. Bring it up during the workshop and have somebody that's been on EDC talk about it, and then it'll give you more, more ability to, make your decision on how you want to spend your money. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it'd be awesome to be able to track it. and see,
Report
or just a report.
Yeah. But we've already done what you guys
I know what we
are
did, I
talking
know what
about.
the impact was.
And it's hard to really see if the money we spent on our businesses really did what we thought it was gonna do.
Yeah, it's hard to quantify.
Yeah.
It was also, I mean, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but it was also hard for boards to say no.
Yes, yeah. But sometimes you gotta say no. So, anyway, I think that's a good point you brought up.
But it's a lot easier to say no if there's guidelines that you can
Exactly.
look to,
We had guidelines,
yeah?
we had all that, and we followed them, but
Not-
I'm
not
not sure we
totally.
really spent the money the right way, whenever I was in the EDC. Okay, I'll shut up.
I know the Lions Club got one of these grants.
Yes, ma'am.
And with it, the Lions Club basically renovated the entire inside of the club. New ceiling, new HC vents, new lighting. That building is used not only for Lions Club meetings, but it had bingo every Friday night and Sunday afternoon. And when it was done, it increased the number of people that came. And the only reason they don't have workers.
That way they stop the big.
That's exactly what it stopped it. They don't have workers, because it's all volunteer.
Right.
So they had maybe 6 Lions that worked every weekend. And we just said, I'm done.
Who were the other
And
5?
what you're talking about there is the revenue, the money that we spent, the money was supposed to be spent to bring in tax dollars to the city and to the EDC, which is all married. And, there was a question about whether or not we should have given it to the Lions Club.
Well, then the Lions Club turns around and donates back to the city.
Yes, ma'am.
How many
It's
years did
all-
they buy
so it's-
equipment
it's
for police and fire and,
a lot to think about.
yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of things involved in making those decisions.
Yeah, a lot of gray areas.
I think there were 2 good points made, though, just presenting, have it at the work session, if that's, everyone's in agreement, but 2, having a presentation of, this is what we did over the last 3 years, here's what worked, here's what didn't work, and here's what guidelines we'd like to see moving forward, rather than just starting over again from a blank sheet.
Let's take, we had discussion on this, let's take no action, and we'll include this in the January work session. We can all be thinking about it between now and then and come up with ideas too, and talk back and forth with staff if we need to, and get some other ideas.
This is already available right now, correct, from the prior year?
No, there's no funding.
Oh, there was no funding of it last year. Oh, I see.
It's funded for this year.
For next year.
Okay?
Yeah, I mean, just for clear, it's funded, but it is not, there is no program yet.
Correct. But I was asking, it sounded like we had this in place last year, but it was.
Prior years.
Prior years it was not available last year. There was nothing given or anything that I missed. That's correct.
Wasn't funded. Get a staff update.
I'm sorry, President. What did you do with 6? Did you postpone it?
We
or did
pulled
you-
it.
You pulled it?
Yep.
So that means you're gonna discuss it later on in the meeting?
No, we pulled it from the agenda. So we're not gonna discuss it tonight.
Okay, so you're not gonna bring it back?
Right, not tonight.
Would suggest postponing it.
Well,
That's what my notes say, postpone to a subsequent EDC meeting.
Okay,
when you
Pull
pull
it,
it, that's
postpone
what it does. It moves it to a future meeting.
okay, sorry.
Get staff report on Old Town and various projects going on, which we have a number of right now.
Yes, I specifically wanted to address tonight the pedestrian bridge project. You've noticed that no dirt has moved yet in there, and that is because when we, as you know, we hired Hill Country Bridge and we hired Wheeler to produce the design documents for the bridge. Everything was fine and moving forward until Hill Country Bridge went out there and actually laid out where the existing where the proposed 165-foot bridge would be. The problem with where it would have been was approximately the deck of the pedestrian bridge would have been 4 to 6 feet above the deck of the vehicular bridge. When asked why it was originally designed that way. And this is frankly something that I take responsibility for. I should have caught that, but I didn't. When asked why it was originally designed that way through the linear park project, we didn't want to, if you recall, when we were going through that, we didn't want to have to go through the Corps of Engineers or FEMA to modify the floodplain, because if you place the pedestrian bridge 4 to 6 feet below where it's proposed, you're essentially affecting the floodplain, okay? Because that 100-year floodplain is over the bridge. Now, realistically, the water, I've never seen the water go over that bridge. Mr. Wooten's been here for a long time, and I don't think he's ever seen water go over that bridge, but it doesn't matter. The fact of it is that the FEMA floodplain is above that level. So what we are looking at doing now is decreasing the length. What we want to do is decrease the length of the bridge, which should allow us some cost savings from, instead of producing a 165-foot bridge, produce a 130, 135-foot bridge, okay? There should be some metal and some design, well, there won't be any design savings, but some metal savings, essentially. At the same time, the city, not the EDC, we have authorized LNV Engineering, who is our city engineer, to complete a flood study for $5,000 in order to prove to the San Antonio River Authority, which administers the FEMA floodplain in the city, that by lowering the height of the bridge to a level that's reasonable is not going to affect the existing FEMA floodplain. Because again, number one, water, and to our knowledge, has never gone over the bridge. Number two, it would be behind the bridge, so the water flows this way. You've got the vehicular bridge, and the pedestrian bridge would be behind that. A number of factors. Basically, their goal is to prove that placing the pedestrian bridge at a lower elevation is not going to affect the FEMA floodplain. When that happens, we can then tell Wheeler Lumber to go ahead and redesign the bridge, hopefully, again, at a cost savings, to still work within the budget number that the EDC has already approved. Any additional cost on that would be borne by the city, not on the EDC. We do have cost savings out of the certificates of obligation. Again, if they're significant enough, we would have to send that to the city council for approval. But at this point, where we're out is the city's out an additional $5,000 to prove that lowering the height of that bridge makes sense and doesn't alter the FEMA floodplain. I do believe that that bridge, and the mayor believed that that bridge, if it was 6 feet above the elevation of the vehicular bridge, it would have looked weird and out of place. In addition, there were significant potentially more significant costs associated with building up the sidewalks on both sides in order to match the elevation of the new bridge. So that's where we are. By the end of this month, we should have that flood study completed and hopefully have San Antonio River Authority approval of that. So then we can go back to Wheeler Lumber and say, you need to lessen the length of the bridge and move on from there. So I don't have any good news, but I don't have any bad news from a financial perspective for the EDC yet. The city is bearing that cost at this point.
Was it tied into item 6 at all, as far as any changes to the floodplain line?
Say again?
The item that we have tabled, that this was not tied into that in any fashion, was it?
No, sir.
Okay.
Are there any questions on where we are on the pedestrian bridge?
Have we written any checks yet?
To,
Redesign or
No.
placement?
no, we haven't cut any checks to Hill Country Bridge. That is incorrect. We cut a check for about $1,900 to Hill Country Bridge because they did come out, do some staking, basically mobilization and all that for them to discover, wait a second, your bridge is going to be way up here. So that is the only check that we have cut. We still haven't cut anything for the LNV check, and we haven't cut anything on the Wheeler Bridge itself yet.
Okay.
And all of them are all aware of this situation, so nobody is wondering why they haven't gotten their check yet. So everybody's on the same page.
More bureaucracy to deal with. Any updates? Well, any updates on progress on the bridge and the intersection? I guess they've given us any updates on when they think they'll be through with that.
The bridge at, on 1560? Bridge on 1560 is on track for completion. I actually don't have the exact dates in front of me. I'd be going by memory at this point, but it's certainly on track. I think it's actually probably a little ahead of schedule. So I think the realignment project was supposed to be completed by mid-2018, if I recall. It's certainly on track to do that. I think they're almost ready to start working on asphalt, frankly. They've done the piers for the traffic control lights that are going to be installed in the area, so that's booming and going. The water and sewer line project, that is, the original estimation was that it would be done by April of 2018. They're more than halfway complete on that project, so I think it will be done before that. They had 270 days, which would have been April of 2018. I think they're going to be, by the end of this year, pretty darn close to being done with that project. Trying to think what other projects that we have going on right now. We do the French Creek Tributary project. I think they're probably a little less or at 50% on that project. That's a considerable project that goes all the way from Helotes Park Estates into behind Cedar Springs and out to 1604, where they're creating what they call a natural waterway conveyance, which essentially takes homes out of the floodplain and makes a bigger channel. The only difference is that channel's not concrete. The channel actually looks like a stream bed. Okay? The other project that we're working on right now, we're meeting on Friday with TxDOT, is the Cedar Trail culvert that goes under the Bandera Road. It's currently undersized, which in the past, I think in 2000, several years ago, water went over Bandera Road during a flood event. I think that was 2008, 2009. TxDOT and the city are working together to upsize that culvert, and so they have agreed to do that project. We should see something in 2018, which is going to be another nightmare when it comes to traffic and everything, because they're going to have to rip up the highway. The Bandera Road Loop 1604 intersection is being completely redone. It's being redone to where...
Don't try to explain it.
It's basically, you're going to cross oncoming traffic in order to take a left. Now, it'll be signaled correctly, so you're not actually crossing oncoming traffic, but that's how that
They call it a counterflow intersection.
counterflow intersection, thank you. That's currently underway.
Or called an accident waiting to happen.
The only other thing going on is the utilities on 1560 from Bandera Road to 1604. They are about to get all of the utility poles installed and move the power lines back, and I expect probably by mid-2018, they'll let the project on that to make that section 4 lanes with a center turn lanes. or
That's the
5
one I was missing, that's Hausman Road, yes,
Houseman Road, which will be another nightmare when they get it all going at one time.
yes.
Rick, that spillway that's been built outside of Los Reyes Canyons between us and the new little subdivision there, is that any of that public, or is that strictly that private development? Right on Bandera Road, right outside of Los Reyes Canyons, and the new subdivision
The
there?
MI homes, that's all a part of that HOA,
That's part of their HOA?
yes. None of that is public.
Okay,
The floodwater retention pond,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
But the impact of, we have a couple of neighbors that, if it changes any of the flood plain at all, it could impact them. So if it's all they're doing, then it'd be private party to private party.
yeah, that would be strictly MI homes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then have you guys discussed the Bitter property at the corner of Hausman and?
I don't think we know anything else at this point.
It's gonna be, I think it's gonna be under him under commercial development
Okay,
update.
I'm sorry, I thought you were already there.
Other than those capital improvement projects, Everything else is fine.
And no 7 or 8 projects?
Yeah.
I did want to update the board on item 9B, that both Rick and myself went up to a conference in Dallas, the International Council of Shopping Centers. We had a booth up there representing Helotes, trying to honestly start attracting some attention. We have been almost fully leased in Helotes for quite a while. We've had no new development. And something that kind of ties into item C. We potentially have 4 large centers coming into Helotes over the next year or 2. So we've had pre-development meetings with 4 different developers, all looking at doing anywhere from 10 to 100,000 square feet. So everybody is definitely seeing the growth. It's the rooftops that are attracting them. And most of them are trying to get about 50% pre-leased before they break ground. So that part is very good. Be a lot of changes.
There will be.
And now, as far as the development updates, most of the utility work has been discussed on prospects. That's where we have really 3 of them. The Texas Premier Capital, it's one we met with this week, that's looking to do a 20,000 square foot strip center in Helotes. The Place, they just acquired acquisition of 2.5 acres at the corner of Hausman and Bandera. It's where the old Compass Bank was. So they are actively marketing that property. I believe we have 3 different prospects on that site. So that we should actually see something in the near future on it. And then we kind of briefly discussed the Rolson interest. That's the 32 acres at Scenic Loop and Bandera, which we'll discuss at a subsequent meeting. New business-wise, we have another fitness training that's over by Babe's Hamburgers. They do not have their final yet, but they should be getting that in the next week or 2. Great Harvest Bread Company is going in next to DeAnthony Salon. I believe the plans were just submitted for that on the finish out. And then you've seen construction happening with the wash tub, and that's also part of the Abizo development. We'll be getting a KFC that's been approved for that site, as well as a 17,000 square foot strip center on that site. And it still leaves about 10 acres of undeveloped land to the rear. The developer's plan is to do a small business park in the future, but he's trying to see how much interest there is in that. And then we do have another 10,000 square foot center is where the Comerica Bank is. They're looking at tearing down the old bank and putting anywhere from a 7 to 10,000 square foot strip center. And then Bitters property. That one, we can all, been a lot of interest. We get phone calls on what's going in there. There's nothing definite at this point. Mr. Bitters is still going through his, little bit on conceptual plan, but on feasibility to see what this area can support, what he can afford to build based on rent he can charge. And right now, it's kind of a mixed use loosely. There is no residential plan on that lot. It's medical office, retail, and restaurant is what he's looking to do.
And we're actively seeking a hotel for that site.
Small hotel.
We were thinking more like 10, 15 stores.
I have a question, if I can. Have we met with Mr. Bitter about possibly annexing the part of that property that's in the county?
Yes, sir.
And
Yes.
is he amenable to that, or?
He's looking at it purely based on cost right now, kind of a cost benefit, really. What it's gonna cost him over the life of the project versus what benefit he gets from the city.
We anticipate that there will have to be an incentive package in order for him to be annexed.
That's something that, to me, the city and the EDC should really concentrate on, because
Absolutely.
there is quite an amount of that property that is not in the city limits.
Yeah, we,
3/4.
All the way over to the Elm Helm Hollow
Right.
apartments. So that
Right,
to me
so-
is a big deal.
It's a little over 13 acres, and probably 10 of it is outside of the city limits.
Yes, sir. So that, to me, is something maybe the EDC and the city needs to really concentrate on as far as incentives, food for thought.
Absolutely.
We're going to be presenting to the EDC and city council at a future meeting a pre-annexation agreement on that property, which would include a Chapter 380 economic development agreement for probably property and sales tax.
Yeah. Rick and Tom have been working with Joe Bitters on that property for several years, talking to him. And it's finally something coming to fruition, so they're staying on top of it.
And I think I've asked this before, but Mr. Bitter doesn't own the apartment complex, is that correct? He does not?
He does not.
Okay.
We had talked offline before the meeting started, with the social media aspects that are coming up and becoming very, very active and very non-factual. If there's any chance of getting through our PR people, some output that would show what we do know, what we don't know, and what could happen or could not happen on those sites, it'd be beneficial, because if you look at next door neighbors, it's just rampant. 113 replies over with 114 different ideas about what's going on, or already approved, or already guessed on that property. So to the extent we can get some information out, not on guessing, but just, here's what the zoning is. We don't have anything done on this property, but this other property, like the wash tub, getting that information out factually, I think would be a big benefit.
I was unclear that there was a whole next door
Oh, yeah.
chat concern about that property.
It's about all the properties. They're talking about every site and the chicken wars and everything that's going on. It makes for great reading if you're staying up at night, but other than that, there's not a lot of facts going out that way.
I've talked with Andrea about it, and she's looking at setting up a Nextdoor account.
I'm sorry, but
We can
you're
track
saying
it.
it's 100 to 150 people or whatever. Tell them to come to the meetings. I mean,
No, I was talking
If
about-
they really want to know what's going on, I mean, we're here working our, what's off, doing all this. I mean, it's easy to find out what's going on if you just participate. I mean, I'm sorry.
Well, it's easy to have 100% vote on elections too, but they don't do that either. It's a matter of getting the information out.
Okay, that's my opinion.
Fortunately for the city, we have a dedicated public relations
Right.
person now, so we will focus on getting a fact sheet
would be
on
great.
development out.
That would be great.
I think that's about it, guys.
Ask one more, is the O'Reilly still going in next to,
Yes, sir.
Body Caves?
We're adjourned at 8:15 PM.
Great.